Welcome to Spotlight Sessions, where we shine a
What's
light
your
on
story?
incredible individuals. What does accessibility mean to you?
What's your mission? Welcome all to accessiBe's Spotlight Sessions, where we shine a light on incredible individuals and organizations and the work that they do. I am your host, Josh Basil. I'm a C4-5 quadriplegic, paralyzed below my shoulders, and a power wheelchair user. I'm the Community Relations Manager at accessiBe and a passionate disability rights advocate and trial attorney focused on breaking down barriers to access and inclusion for people with disabilities. Today on accessiBe Spotlight Sessions, we're joined by Armando Contreras, the President and CEO of United Cerebral Palsy. Welcome, Armando.
Josh, thank you for the invitation, and thanks to accessiBe as well. It's an honor to be with you.
I'm excited to have you on the program today and just to learn more about you. So let's wait no further. Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Well, let me begin by I've been married with Norma, my wife, for 35 plus years, and we have three beautiful children: Andrea, Michelle, who's married with Fabian. They live in Phoenix, and Armando, Michael, Logan. They are in Colorado with our first grandson, Theodore Miguel. And then we have Andrew Matthew, who's in Portland and soon to be married next year. So I'm a dad, right, and a grandfather now, and very, very proud of that. I'm also,
Congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Josh. I'm also the president and CEO of United Cerebral Palsy National. I've been there for over 6 years now. And prior to that, I was the CEO for United Cerebral Palsy of Central Arizona, where we provided direct services to children and adults with cerebral palsy and other conditions like Down syndrome, autism, developmental delays.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And tell me a little bit more about the work of United Cerebral Palsy and then the work that you're doing as well.
Sure. So at the national level, we have a membership model where we have 56 affiliates in the United States, and 2 of them are in Canada. And it's those affiliates that provide direct services. So the services, we don't have a cookie cutter type of model where everybody does the same thing. So in the United States, you can have an affiliate that works on transportation, taking people with disabilities from point A to point B. We have some that concentrate on employment. We have others that concentrate on early intervention, early detection. We have pre-K schools that have this model of combining typical kids with disabilities, where then when they go to kindergarten, they've been in an environment that will help them to better live through the kindergarten experience, right, with typical kids. And then we have day programs, we have HCBS programs. There are many other types of programs that help to facilitate employment, right? And we also have programs that, like the day treatment for adults, that there's a lot of outings and trainings and experiences that they have so they can have more accessibility. In addition to that, that's what our affiliates do. From the national part, we provide a value proposition of, number one, it's our historic name of United Cerebral Palsy, which most of the affiliates use as their brand. And next year, I'm happy to say that we will be celebrating our 75th anniversary. So 75 years ago.
Congratulations again.
Thank you. 75 years ago, coming from the advocates, families that wanted more for their children that had cerebral palsy, then you look at 75 years later, and there's been a tremendous amount of work Our affiliates provide services to approximately 155,000 individuals, includes children and adults. We're still looking at what that impact looks like, Josh. How does that impact families? How does it impact the schools? How does it impact the communities? So those are the things that now we're looking at and trying to get more data, so then we can share that data out there of what the amazing things that our affiliates are doing around the country.
And that it's getting those data points helps kind of paint the bigger picture of the impact, like you were saying. But like, it's just the amount of lives that you get to touch, and it's not just the person with a disability; it's their friends, it's their family members, it's the whole community. Disability community is so much bigger than a lot of people think it is, and the brand, the buying power of it, the influence. It's a incredible community, especially when united. But I would love to know more, kind of, Armando, what kind of motivated you to come down this path and find your way to United Cerebral Palsy?
Well, it's interesting because it was about maybe 13 years ago. Is I was working for the governor here in Arizona, Governor Napolitano, and then she moved on to work for President Barack Obama. And then I got hired by the Arizona Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. But while I was there, I was approached by United Cerebral Palsy, and they said, we're looking for somebody like yourself to kind of help us more on the business administrative stuff, fundraising, the building relationships with the community. That's my forte, right? And building relationships with other partners. So it was just strange because when I was thinking about it, my dad had a car accident before I was born, and then he had a disability where he couldn't work anymore for the rest of his life. So that affected our lives because we were on government assistance, right? And the story quickly is that when my mom was in the hospital in Los Angeles having me, I'm the oldest, my dad was in that same hospital dying of that accident, right? Well, he lived,
Wow.
thanks be to God. Yeah, he lived. He lived until he was 81. So that was one reason. In addition to that, I have a cousin that has cerebral palsy in Mexico. And his mom, which is my cousin also, his mom passed away during the birth. So, that he's been through so many operations, and I believe he has to be in his maybe late 40s, 50s. And then in addition to that, I also have another cousin that has a child that has cerebral palsy. So there is definitely that connection. And then when you go into this arena of disabilities and you begin to find out that your friends and other family members have some kind of a connection, with somebody that has a disability. So that was two parts. One was the business acumen that they were looking for, and then my passion for people with disabilities and the vulnerable. I've always been a servant leader, thanks be to God, and that's why I'm still here.
Well, United Cerebral Palsy is very lucky to have your skills and talents and your big heart. And I'd love to. Could you tell us a little bit of some memorable stories at United Cerebral Palsy that have had a lasting impact on you?
Sure, yeah. So at United Cerebral Palsy of Central Arizona, that's where I engaged with. I had approximately 400 employees. I'd say half of them were probably part time, but that's where I was having a direct connection with families and with the children and adults that we served. So what made a lasting impact, a lifelong impact, is that when parents would say to me, Armando, the doctors have said that our child will never speak, will never walk, will never run, will never really move. And thanks to the amazing work of therapists, And the overall team, it didn't matter what position you had at United Cerebral Palsy, if you were in maintenance, or if you were in administration, or if you were in HCBS, or if you were directly in therapy, is that I got to see firsthand that these children began to walk, they began to run, they began to speak. I would invite them to speak at galas and bring them up where they can give their testimony and people can see it, that they could walk up to the podium, that they could run up to the podium, and that they can articulate. But some of the biggest things for me that's been etched in my heart is that when I got to see the children ride their bike for the first time, kiss their parents for the first time, hug their parents for the first time, while we may take some of those things for granted, those were amazing milestones and sacred experiences for me, right? That we were making a difference in people's lives.
Well, it's so important to not judge a book by a cover, but also like doctors love to like try to say things that and predict the future, but like doing stuff like that does nothing but like relinquish hope. And the fact is that if you provide the right supports and with time, so much can happen. And it's just, the second that you put a prognosis like that and you don't give somebody the supports they need, that's when they truly fall through the cracks. Can you never see what would be possible in the future? So I'm glad the services that you provide are there and are continued throughout lifetimes of a person. And it's life-changing work that you're doing. And I love hearing memorable stories like that. So thank you, Armando.
Yeah,
And I would love for you to tell us a little bit more about the importance of building alliances between United Cerebral Palsy and kind of the other national advocacy groups across the country.
Yeah, so a good example is this, Josh, is that during the pandemic, COVID, the COVID journey was a very difficult one. And many of the national organizations came together, Access, Anchor, Goodwill, Easter Seals, NACDD, CDC. We all came together for trying to find solutions. And one thing that on the advocacy level that we led at United Cerebral Palsy was to make sure that and I'll explain it, that the standards of care in the United States, that they were equitable and that they took into account people with disabilities. So really what that meant was that hospitals were getting inundated, right? We all knew that. And that to get on a breathing machine, they only had so many machines. So they were really life and death situations. So in certain states like New Jersey, they have a great standards of care policy where they take into account people with disabilities, right? And in other states, they did not. So we were advocates about you cannot place somebody with a disability on the bottom of the totem pole. They have to be considered like anybody else. Because what that meant really was that if they didn't have the appropriate medical and vital life-saving equipment for them, then they would die. And that's what was happening in the United States in certain states. So we, as a national organization, along with many others, we were advocating for that. So that was one. The other advocacy piece during COVID was that many in the disability community were uncertain of in the very initial when the news was breaking out that there was this whole pandemic. People in the disability community were very afraid because there was a lack of information. How did that affect people with disabilities, cerebral palsy, Down syndrome? So we had to go to researchers and find out, to medical doctors, was it a higher risk? And we found out that it was higher risk. We found out that yes, that people with disabilities had a higher risk of contracting COVID or even dying from COVID. So we were advocates out there with many other organizations. In addition to that, then how were we as an organization how are we as our affiliates, how are they going to run their business if and the vital services if people were at home? So then we started looking into those virtual options. Our affiliates did a great job of doing the work as well. I mean, they really stepped up. I have to say that the CEOs and the leadership of our affiliates were looking for every way to make sure that services were not going to cease, and they found ways virtually, or they found ways that they were having protective equipment to continue the services. And then obviously there was the funding piece, right? That each state had their challenges. Were states going to pour in and invest during a time that was very uncertain? And some states really came through and started helping our affiliates to continue services in the best way that they could. So those were just some of many advocacy efforts. One last piece here is that we have been approached by several of the leadership in Congress and in the Senate, and one in particular is Steve Coven, Congressman Stephen Coven, that wanted us to endorse his bill that would increase the funding for cerebral palsy research at the NIH level and at the CDC level. So now we're beginning to be approached on those things because of who we are. And lastly, there's a lot more, but lastly here is that we are on the White House list of national organizations. So when the White House has a update regarding disabilities, and we're invited to those updates and those calls under the Biden administration.
It's good to have a seat at the table, and also within your advocacy work and your affiliates, it's all about power and numbers to really make large scale change. But you got to start somewhere, and I love everything that you're doing. As I've said before, and what first comes to mind when you hear the word accessibility?
The first thing that comes to mind is that there should be accessibility throughout the world, and it should be something that is just part of everyday living, and that it should be at the top of the priorities in the for-profit world, in the corporate world, in government, in the nonprofit world. That is just a part of our society, that that accessibility is really the thread that that should be just commonality, and nothing that it's something new or a burden or something that we have to pursue. Accessibility should just be part of everyday life.
I 100% agree with you. And what role do you think technology plays when it comes to creating more inclusion for people with disabilities?
I think what I've seen in the past few years, and I'm not an expert, but I have seen exponentially that technology is becoming a great tool, perhaps something that has been helping people with disabilities, from even the wheelchairs of those that use wheelchairs. There's power chairs, there's chairs that are becoming even more accessible. You have apps that are assisting, with communications. We're kind of in this world that is new with artificial intelligence. I think there's some part of that could be helpful, and there's still some other parts of that still needs to be explored. But assistive technology plays a huge role. What I do want to say about that, Josh, is that we're in conversations with Google, United Cerebral Palsy, and when I am in those conversations, I'm advocating that the self-advocate, that people in the disability world that have a disability be the ones that provide the input, not us. We at United Cerebral Palsy do not want to speak for people with disabilities. We want to provide a voice for them. We want them to be at the table with Google, with Apple, with Microsoft, right? So then that whatever's developed, that it's a meaningful development with the input of people with disabilities, because they know best. They know best of how to look at things. There's another great firm, a company called Waymo, and Waymo is the company, the corporation that builds the technology for autonomous driving. So one example, because I've heard this from many self-advocates, is that they invest, Josh, and you know this, they invest at least $100,000 when they're going to buy a van, and then they're going to revamp the van so it could be accessible. I think what happens sometimes is that what I've heard from automobile experts is that when you start pulling things out of a van and you make it more accessible, you could be losing the aerodynamics, how that particular vehicle was meant to be built, and it could become a little dangerous afterwards, right? But with our conversations with Waymo, right, that they provide technology for autonomous cars, that while they don't have a car yet for accessibility, that we are advocating that people with disabilities speak to their R&D, right, research and development team, to see how that might work. Because wouldn't it be great that we can save the disability community hundreds of thousands of dollars from buying a van or having a family dependent on a family member to take them from A to B to C, when they could have a subscription to autonomous vehicles and they can get picked up at any time that they want, and they can go anywhere that they want, right?
Sign me up.
Yeah.
Sign me up, Armando. That sounds amazing.
Well, I'll introduce you to the
No,
I'd be glad to. Yeah.
I would love that. I would love that. And
So
Armando, I just cannot thank you enough.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Josh.
No, I cannot thank you enough for your time and being our guest today on accessiBe's Spotlight Sessions. Love all that you do and that you continue to do. But thank you so much, Armando.
Josh, thank you. And I look forward to inviting me back. I would love to be back again. And thank you and accessibility.
Absolutely. And to all of our guests, thank you so much for staying to the end of accessiBe's Spotlight Sessions. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and to follow us at accessiBe_community. And as always, thank you for being on this journey. Take care, everyone. And until next time. Bye, everyone.